Welcome, dear friend, and a quiet thank you for choosing to spend this time with us, nestled here in the gentle unfolding of our story, the Atlas of Forgotten Footsteps. It is our sincerest hope that the words you are about to hear and the soft spaces between them will act as a tender balm for the mind, a gentle current to carry you without effort towards the peaceful shores of restful slumber, allowing the day's accumulated cares and hurried thoughts to drift away as effortlessly as thistledown upon a slow, warm stream. Before you settle in fully, allowing your eyes to close and the sounds of your device to soften into the quiet hush of your room, might we gently suggest, if these tales bring you a measure of comfort and welcome ease, that a simple tap to like this story, or perhaps to subscribe to our little haven of tranquility, would be a most welcome kindness indeed. It helps others, who may also be seeking just such a moment of profound peace, to find their quiet way here too. And now, with a soft breath out, let us begin our journey with Caelan into the heart of Whisperwood. Chapter 1. The Threshold of Whisperwood. The world outside, Whisperwood had become a cacophony, a relentless hum of hurried footsteps, demanding voices, and the ceaseless clatter of unseen machines. Caelan carried this noise within, a persistent echo in the quietest corners of the mind. Standing now at the forest's edge felt like approaching the shore of a vast, silent ocean. The trees here were different. Ancient sentinels draped in heavy cloaks of moss, their immense branches interwoven far above, creating a roof against the sky. Even the air felt different, thicker somehow, softer, carrying the cool, damp scent of earth, decaying leaves, and something subtly sweet, perhaps hidden wildflowers. Taking a breath here was not just inhaling air, but drawing in quietness. The sounds of the nearby town, which had pursued Caelan even to this threshold, seemed to falter and fade against the forest's invisible boundary. Instead, new sounds emerged, gentle and unobtrusive, the almost imperceptible rustle of leaves stirred by a breath of wind too high to feel, the distant musical trickle of unseen water, the soft chirrick of an unknown insect. It was a soundscape woven from tranquility itself, a stark contrast to the world left behind only moments ago. Caelan hesitated for a moment, one foot still on the well-trodden path outside, the other hovering over the mossy carpet within. It felt like a significant step, not just into a forest, but into a different state of being. The ground inside looked impossibly soft, a tapestry of emerald, jade, and charcoal greens, thick and plush like the finest velvet. It promised to yield underfoot, to muffle the sound of passage, to welcome rather than resist. Gathering a quiet resolve, Caelan stepped fully into the embrace of Whisperwood. The ground was even softer than imagined, springy and cool beneath worn boots. The sound of the footstep was absorbed almost instantly, leaving behind only silence. Looking up, the canopy was a dense latticework of leaves and branches, filtering the afternoon sun into dappled patterns that danced slowly on the forest floor. Specks of golden light shifted and merged, illuminating patches of moss or the intricate texture of bark before moving on, like gentle spotlights in a slow, natural ballet. The effect was mesmerizing, drawing the eye and calming the mind with its gentle, ceaseless movement. Progress was slow, deliberate. There was no path here in the conventional sense, no beaten track, only the subtle invitations of the landscape, a slightly wider gap between ferns, a less steep incline, an ancient log fallen just so, offering a natural bridge over a damp hollow. Caelan moved instinctively, drawn deeper into the woods, the air growing cooler, the scents richer. The feeling of being watched wasn't present. Instead, there was a sense of being held, encompassed by the ancient, quiet life all around. With each step, a layer of internal noise seemed to peel away, shed like dry leaves. The anxieties that had felt so sharp and pressing only an hour before began to dull, their edges softening. The muscles in Caelan's shoulders, habitually tight, started to release their grip, feeling a little heavier, a little looser. It was the forest itself, breathing its slow, steady rhythm, inviting Caelan to match its pace, to simply be present within its vast green sanctuary. The silence deepened, becoming not an absence of sound, but a presence in itself. It was a rich, textured quiet, filled with the subtle life of the woods. Occasionally, a bird would call, a clear, flute-like note that hung in the air for a moment before dissolving back into the stillness. It wasn't an interruption, but rather an embellishment, a reminder of the gentle vitality that thrived here, hidden beneath the moss and leaves. As the light began to soften further, hinting at the approach of evening, Caelan found a large, moss-covered boulder nestled amongst ferns. The moss was thick and cool to the touch, inviting rest. Caelan sat, leaning back against the stone, feeling its solid, ancient presence. Closing weary eyes, Caelan focused only on the feeling of the cool moss, the scent of the woods, the gentle sounds, and the slow, even rhythm of breath. Here, on the threshold, the journey towards quiet had truly begun. Chapter 2. Encounter with the Hermit. Deeper. Now within Whisperwood, the trees stood taller, their roots like gnarled knuckles gripping the earth. The air remained soft and cool, carrying the perpetual scent of damp soil and greenery. Caelan had walked for what felt like a comfortable eternity, guided less by direction and more by the pull of the forest's quiet heart. The luminous trails of the Atlas remained unseen, but the sense of peace deepened with every step, settling like soft dew upon the spirit. The journey itself felt like the destination, a slow unwinding of tension, a gradual attuning to the forest's gentle frequency. It was the sound of water, slightly louder now, more distinct than the distant trickles heard before, that drew Caelan onward. Parting a curtain of low-hanging, moss-draped branches revealed a small clearing. A stream, clear as glass, meandered through it, chuckling softly over smooth gray stones. Sunlight, finding a rare opening in the canopy, pooled on the water's surface, making it glitter. And beside the stream, nestled against the roots of a colossal oak, was a dwelling. It was less a house and more an extension of the forest itself. Built from weathered wood and stone, its roof was a living tapestry of the same thick moss that carpeted the ground, blending seamlessly with the surroundings. A thin ribbon of smoke, smelling faintly of wood smoke and herbs, curled lazily from a stone chimney, the only clear sign of habitation. Beside the simple wooden door, pots of ferns and flowering herbs thrived, their leaves glistening with moisture. It radiated an aura of profound peace, belonging. As Caelan watched, uncertain whether to approach, the door opened with a soft creak. A figure emerged, moving with a quiet grace that seemed perfectly attuned to the rhythm of the woods. It was a woman, her hair the color of silvered bark, woven into a simple braid. Her face was lined but serene, her eyes holding the calm depth of the forest pools. She wore simple clothes of homespun cloth in muted greens and browns. Seeing Caelan, she offered a gentle smile, entirely welcoming, without a trace of surprise. "Welcome," she said, her voice low and soft like the rustling of leaves. "You've walked far. Come, rest by the water. I am Maeve." She gestured towards a smooth, flat rock near the stream bank, already warmed by the dappled sunlight. There was no questioning, no demand for explanation, only quiet acceptance. Caelan felt the last vestiges of apprehension melt away, replaced by a sense of ease. Maeve disappeared inside her dwelling for a moment, returning with 2 steaming mugs. She handed one to Caelan. It was warm earthen pottery, comforting to hold. The steam rising from it carried the gentle, soporific scents of chamomile and lavender, blended with a hint of honey. Caelan took a slow sip. The tea was warm, soothing, tasting exactly as it smelled, like liquid calm. It seemed to spread warmth, not just through the body, but through the mind as well, loosening tight knots of thought. They sat in comfortable silence for a long while, simply listening to the stream's gentle music and the occasional bird call. Maeve seemed perfectly content with the quiet, her presence unobtrusive, yet deeply reassuring. Caelan watched the way the light played on the water, the dance of small insects above the surface, the slow sway of ferns in an almost imperceptible breeze. It was easy to just be here, without the need for words or action. Eventually, Maeve spoke again, her voice barely disturbing the stillness. "The forest speaks to those who listen," she murmured, looking not at Caelan, but towards the ancient trees. "The atlas you seek. It is not parchment and ink. It is written on the quiet air, on the moss, in the light. It reveals itself to a peaceful heart." Her words were simple, yet held a profound resonance, confirming Caelan's own growing intuition. The path wasn't about finding an object, but about finding a state of being. Maeve, it seemed, would be a gentle guide on that inner journey. Chapter 3. Learning to See the Glow. The days that followed settled into a gentle rhythm, guided by the sun's slow arc across the canopy and the quiet presence of Maeve. There were no schedules, no demands, only the natural unfolding of time within Whisperwood. Maeve didn't teach in a formal sense. She simply invited Caelan to share in her quiet routines, her deep communion with the forest. Mornings often began with sitting by the stream, not talking, but simply observing. Maeve would point out the subtle differences in the water's murmur as it flowed over stones of varying shapes and sizes, the way small eddies formed and dissolved. She encouraged Caelan to close their eyes and just listen, identifying the individual threads in the forest's tapestry of sound, the specific chirp of a wren, the distant tap-tap-tap of a woodpecker, the sigh of wind high in the pines, the undercurrent of the stream's song. It was an exercise in focused presence, drawing the mind away from internal chatter and anchoring it in the sensory world. Sometimes they would walk slowly through the woods, Maeve pausing to touch the bark of a particular tree, her fingers tracing its rough or smooth texture. She'd invite Caelan to do the same, to feel the coolness of moss, the surprising warmth of a sun-dappled patch of leaves, the smooth surface of a water-worn stone collected from the stream bed. Each sensation was explored gently, mindfully, without judgment or analysis, simply noticing the physical reality of the forest's embrace. Other times were spent in Maeve's small, fragrant herb garden behind her dwelling. They would tend the plants, their hands moving slowly through the soil, weeding gently, watering from a simple wooden pail. The air here was thick with the scents of mint, rosemary, thyme, and the ever-present calming notes of lavender and chamomile. Maeve explained how each plant had its own quiet energy, its own subtle contribution to the forest's balance. Working with the earth felt grounding, connecting Caelan to the slow, steady cycles of growth and nourishment. Maeve spoke often of the Atlas, but always indirectly. The quiet ones leave gentle traces, she might say, watching a deer step silently through the undergrowth, or peace has a resonance, like a soft light. She explained that the mind, when busy and agitated, couldn't perceive these subtle frequencies. It required stillness and openness, a willingness to simply receive without striving. Like letting one's eyes adjust to dim light, the perception of the Atlas required patience and a letting go of effort. Caelan practiced this stillness. During the quiet moments sitting by the stream or resting against an ancient tree, Caelan would consciously relax, letting the breath be slow and even. Recalling Maeve's gentle guidance, Caelan focused on the feeling of warmth spreading through limbs growing heavy and relaxed, the release of tension held unknowingly in the jaw or forehead. Thoughts still came, but Caelan learned to let them drift past like clouds, returning gently to the sensation of breathing, the sound of the water, the feeling of the mossy ground. It happened gradually, almost imperceptibly at first. One afternoon, sitting near a cluster of ferns, whose fronds seemed to sway even without a breeze, Caelan noticed it, a faint shimmer on the ground near the base of the ferns. It wasn't sunlight. The light here was dim and diffused. It was a soft, silvery blue luminescence, like moonlight captured in threads. It traced a delicate curving line for a few feet before fading back into the forest floor. It was subtle, ethereal, and breathtakingly beautiful. Heart-filled with a quiet wonder, Caelan didn't move, didn't try to grasp it, simply observed. A moment later, another faint trail appeared nearby, weaving gently around the roots of a birch tree. They weren't solid lines, but rather fleeting impressions, like echoes of light. Maeve, sitting nearby, nodded gently, a knowing softness in her eyes. "The forest remembers peace," she whispered. Caelan had begun to see the glowing threads of the Atlas, not by searching, but by finally becoming quiet enough to perceive them. Chapter 4. Following the shimmering paths. Learning to see the Atlas trails was one thing. Learning to follow them was another gentle lesson in trust and surrender. The silvery blue luminescence wasn't constant, appearing more clearly when Caelan's mind was calm and receptive, fading when focus wavered or thoughts became too busy. Following required a slow, mindful pace, keeping the heart quiet and the senses open. It wasn't like following a marked path. It was like walking alongside a whispered suggestion. The trails never led anywhere jarring or difficult. They meandered, weaving between trees, skirting thickets of thorns, dipping into shallow dells carpeted with violets, and rising gently over mossy hillocks. Walking these paths felt strangely effortless, as if the ground itself were subtly guiding Caelan's feet. There was a comforting sense of companionship, a feeling of walking in the peaceful footsteps of countless others who had sought solace in Whisperwood long ago. Maeve sometimes accompanied Caelan on these quiet explorations, but often encouraged Caelan to venture alone, trusting the guidance of the Atlas. The trails led to places of unexpected beauty, sanctuaries hidden within the larger sanctuary of the woods. One path culminated in a small, perfectly circular clearing where tall ferns grew in abundance. When a soft breeze stirred them, they emitted a low, resonant hum, a gentle chorus that seemed to vibrate deep within the chest, soothing and calming. Caelan sat there for a long time, simply absorbing the sound, feeling tensions dissolve in the green hum. Another trail led downwards, towards the sound of water, ending beside a pool so still and dark it perfectly reflected the canopy above, and remarkably, the stars, even though it was daytime. It was as if the pool held a piece of the night sky within its depths. Gazing into it felt like gazing into serene infinity, quieting the mind and bringing a sense of perspective. Tiny, iridescent fish darted occasionally through the reflected star field, the only movement in the water's dark mirror. A different path, shimmering faintly over fallen leaves and pine needles, led to a sun-dappled slope where small, furry creatures grazed peacefully. They resembled soft, rounded bundles of moss and fur, with large, dark eyes that held no fear. They looked up calmly as Caelan approached, then returned to their gentle nibbling, radiating an aura of complete trust and contentment. Simply being near them felt like receiving a blessing of peace. Caelan sat quietly at the edge of the slope, watching them, feeling a connection to their simple, untroubled existence. Following the atlas became a form of moving meditation. The focus required to perceive the subtle light kept the mind anchored in the present moment. The gentle beauty of the surroundings filled the senses. The act of walking, slow and deliberate, soothed the body. There was no destination in mind, only the experience of the journey itself, unfolding one shimmering step at a time. The internal noise that Caelan had carried into the woods had faded significantly, replaced by the quiet hum of the ferns, the reflection of stars in the pool, the soft presence of the grazing creatures. Sometimes the trails would branch, offering different ways forward, none seemingly more important than another. Caelan learned to choose intuitively, drawn by a subtle feeling, a quality of light, or the scent on the air. There was no wrong path, Maeve had assured. All peaceful journeys eventually led towards the forest's quiet heart. The atlas wasn't just showing the way, it was teaching a way of being present, receptive, and trusting in the gentle unfolding of the path ahead. With each journey along these luminous ways, Caelan felt lighter, freer. The weight of past worries and future anxieties seemed to diminish, replaced by a growing sense of peace and a quiet wonder at the subtle magic woven into the fabric of Whisperwood. The forest wasn't just a place, it was a healer, and the atlas was its gentle prescription, leading Caelan step by shimmering step towards inner stillness. Chapter 5. Finding the Still Center. The shimmering trails of the atlas, once elusive whispers of light, now seemed a more familiar presence on the forest floor, a gentle guide through the deepening tranquility of Whisperwood. Caelan moved with a newfound ease, a quiet confidence born not of mastery, but of acceptance. The desire to find the atlas or even a specific destination had long since faded, replaced by the simple joy of walking, observing, and breathing with the forest. The journey itself, paced by the slow rhythm of nature, had become the reward. Yet there was a subtle convergence happening. The paths, though varied, seemed to be gently drawing Caelan towards a particular area of the woods. It wasn't marked by any dramatic change in scenery. The trees remained tall and moss-draped, the light soft and filtered. Rather, it was a change in atmosphere, a deepening of the already profound quiet. The air here felt exceptionally still. The usual subtle sounds, the rustle of leaves, the distant bird calls seemed even more hushed, held gently within a palpable silence. Here, the atlas trails didn't just lead forward. They began to weave intricate patterns on the ground. Silvery blue lines looped and spiraled, crossing and recrossing each other, creating luminous, lace-like designs across the mossy earth. They weren't directing towards a single point, but rather delineating a space. An area where countless peaceful journeys had culminated, their resonant calm layering upon itself over centuries. This, Caelan understood, was the heart of Whisperwood, not a place on a map, but a state of profound stillness. Caelan found a spot near the base of an immense, ancient cedar, its bark thick and deeply furrowed like the lines on a wise old face. The moss here was particularly plush, cool, and inviting. Sitting down, leaning back against the solid trunk, Caelan felt an immediate sense of belonging, of having arrived. There was nothing more to seek, nothing more to follow. The invitation now was simply to be still, to merge with the quietude of this sacred center. Closing eyes, Caelan focused on the breath, slow and deep, inhaling the cool, clean air, exhaling softly. The silence wasn't empty, it felt full, rich, humming with a low, gentle energy. It felt ancient and deeply comforting. Thoughts arose, but they felt distant, less substantial, like ripples on the surface of a deep, still pool. They came and went without disturbing the underlying calm. Caelan felt the pleasant weight of relaxed limbs, the gentle warmth spreading through the body, the complete support of the earth beneath. Time seemed to lose its usual structure. Moments stretched, filled only with the sensation of breathing, the feeling of the cedar's rough bark against the back, the cool touch of moss beneath fingertips, the profound, enveloping silence. There was a sense of connection here, not just to the forest, but to all the quiet souls who had rested in this place before, leaving behind their echoes of peace woven into the Atlas trails. It was a shared stillness, a communion across time. Opening eyes again, the world seemed subtly brighter, the greens of the moss more vibrant, the filtered light softer. A small iridescent beetle crawled slowly across a nearby leaf, its movements precise and unhurried. Watching it felt like watching a tiny piece of the forest's magic, going about its gentle business. There was no need for grand revelations or dramatic events. The magic was here, in the stillness, in the intricate patterns of light, in the simple act of peaceful existence. Caelan understood now that the Atlas hadn't led to a treasure to be claimed, but to a treasure to be experienced, the treasure of inner peace, of connection, of simply being fully present in a tranquil world. The noise Caelan had carried into the woods felt like a distant memory, replaced by this deep, resonant quietude. This still center wasn't just a location within Whisperwood. It was a place Caelan could now carry within. A sanctuary accessible through the practice of quiet awareness learned along the shimmering paths. Sitting there, embraced by the ancient trees and the profound silence, Caelan felt utterly, peacefully home.